Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can click the little link below and join us in the future to actually be part of the conversation here in Zoom. Now, if you're here in Zoom and this is the first time you have joined our little meeting here, welcome. It's good to have you here. There's a couple things going on. You'll see that you probably, if you're new, you're an attendee. That's where you all start. You'll notice that there's a bunch of panelists, and you're probably wondering, how did these people become panelists? Well, they got here early. So we open at 6 o'clock on the dot. So you can come in at 6. I'm not going to promise anything between 6 and 6:30. We're just talking. We're having coffee. We're kind of working out some little details. A lot of times there is some very technical talk, and sometimes not so much. So, but 6 to 6:30, we're all kind of hanging out. At 6:30, we hand out the discount link. No, the Discord link. So we hand out the Discord link. The Discord link is where we all talk between all of these shows. That's our Slack-like text sharing tool. You have to be here at 6:30 to get it. By the time I do this announcement, it's already been expired. So you have to come another day to get in Discord. There's about 500 of us there. So if you are interested, you're more than welcome. Then at 6:40, if you've gotten here before we started the mic checks and you raise your Zoom hand, we'll bring you in for mic checks and let you join the conversation. Our request is that you make sure that your video is good, your audio is good, and your internet is good, and be ready to do that. But if you're watching and you think that you've got better answers than us, that you think that you can do better than this crew, welcome. We'd love to have you. So we'd love to make sure that you come in, you become part of that conversation. We're getting close to running out of people, out of slots here. We've got one left today, but definitely it goes up and down. We can have as few as 25 and as many as 49. So, but we'd love to have you join and become part of this conversation if you think you have something to contribute. So anyway, that's kind of basically how this works. If you're an attendee, you'll see a Q&A down below. The Q&A is for questions, not for comments. So only put questions in there. Keep them short. We have to read these live. So less than 5 lines, 1 question per post. If you put more questions in, we might only read the first one, might not read it at all, might just dismiss it. If you put a long one in, most of the time we'll dismiss it. So if you keep them short, now you'll see a bunch of questions up there already. And what you want to do is you want to, you're going to want to vote those questions up as best you can. We got an open mic somewhere, so everyone check your mics there. Anyway, so you can vote the questions up as needed. So if you think it's good, if you want us to ask that question, vote them up. We get to all the questions typically, but the last ones might be yes or no. so we move very quickly. We're going to move very quickly to 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock on the dot. Between 8 and 8:01, we will switch to what we call the second hour. Today, the second hour is going to be with Leo Laporte, who I'm on Mac Break with. The illustrious Leo Laporte is going to join us at 8 o'clock and have a conversation. So it'll be an open conversation with all of us to talk about how he got here and how he approaches what he does. And so we're pretty excited to have him here at 8 o'clock. We're not gonna do Memo Live today. Oliver has a conflict, so we're not gonna have a third hour that we often have or sometimes have. Tomorrow, Jeff Keithley is gonna be on, and he's gonna talk about cloud production. How do you do all this video production in the cloud? He was on once before. It was amazing. We want to bring him back and see what he's learned over the last couple of weeks, because things are moving fast. And then Saturday is the long day where we kind of deal with, we go through a lot more technical pieces. We have Nick Justishin, who is head of immersive media at Drexel University, talking about Unreal Engine and how to get started and kind of walking us through that process. Steve Bays, the former senior product manager for Final Cut, is actually going to be here talking about deep cuts inside of Final Cut. Alex 4D Goldner, who does a lot of work for the BBC, is going to talk about designing graphics for broadcast. And then we're still working on the noon one, but we'll have a noon hour as well. So that's all coming up on Saturday. Sunday is kind of a more relaxed day where we just kind of we have 2 hours of Q&A, and so that's kind of what's coming up for us. And then Monday we start all over again. We do this 7 days a week. Anyway, I think we have covered everything here. So we're going to go ahead and let's start with the questions. Phil, can you manage questions today?
Sure thing. Just one thing. Once the questions are in the question panel, please don't touch it other than thumbs upping it. Don't answer it. Don't comment
Yeah,
on it?
Yeah, no, it's a fragile system, and when you start answering it or putting comments in, it causes trouble with how we manage them. So yeah, please do not answer any of the questions in the Q&A. Only vote on them. Thanks.
Great. Troy Warrior asks, how do you add filters to a USB mic before input to Zoom? Mac and PC, please. Audio hijack is one for Mac.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
What I'm using actually for my mic into Zoom is I'm using what's called Voice Meter Banana, which is a multi-mixing device. And I'm using a third-party program free called Cantabile, which allows you to bring VSTs into the mix, which then goes into Zoom.
That's great. And that's on the PC?
Yeah, that is on a PC, yes.
So, and a lot of us, I think, on the Mac are using Audio Hijack to do those things. Go ahead, Victor.
Just quickly, you might want to check on your USB mic itself if it has like a roll-off switch to get rid of some of those really low frequencies that we aren't really going to use. That's something you can do right on the mic even before you hit your computer.
That's great. Next question.
Esbjorn Larson asks, looking to get the audio implements IFB in-ear monitors, but I prefer both ears plugged in. It gives them better focus. Any thoughts of why I should get only one ear like Alex rather than both?
Go ahead, Bill.
No, I've worked with a lot of people who use an IFB in the television industry, so it really depends on what you aspire to. The ability to hear one set of content in one ear and another through your regular ear can be very valuable as you move up in the business, because you're often has somebody talking to you while you're trying to present.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely go back and forth when I'm doing more radio style things. A lot of times I want to plug both ears. One of the other things is that you got to be careful that you can monitor yourself well so that you can hear your voice. If you plug both your ears and you're not getting a good monitor, you'll tend to talk louder and it'll sound like you're shouting into the show. So you want to just kind of, that kind of helps having an open ear, has you kind of have a more natural approach to it most of the time. Anyway, next question. Good question.
Julian Elkin asks about remote audio sports commentary broadcast standards, best kit and workflow, considering Intior or Skype TX, maybe NDI Cloud. Biggest issue is commentators' locations all over the world. AWS Accelerator for live TV.
Well, there's level of effort, so there are ways that this gets done for a lot of these shows. There's organizations like Pac-12 that are doing this at scale. They're doing 2,000 of sports events a year, over 2,000 sports events a year and the commentators are sometimes there and sometimes remote. One of the things you want to think about is a lot of commentators like to be there. And the reason that they like to be there is, number one, is that they say they can feel the crowd better. I think a lot of it is that it's a lot more fun to be there. So anyway, I think a lot of commentators will try to lean on it. But now that we are going remotely, I mean, one of the things you really want to look at is latency. So how quickly can you get it to the commentator? So I think that there's a lot of different ways that you can manage that. At an industrial level, you have a variety of, you can build your own with a Nevion. Nevion builds backbones that we'll use. If you have your own access to dark fiber, that will handle it at the very highest end. Then you have the switch is going to be a very low latency connection that's going to give you less than a frame, or maybe a frame or two to you. And that's for a commentator. That's plenty of speed. And then you'll be about 3 or 4 times more, at 100, 125 milliseconds for something like LTN that's going to get you there. So there's a bunch of different options that you have. A lot of times to think about with the commentators is, what quality do they need to see? They don't need to see the final broadcast version. So if you're looking at a consumer version, you can have a web, you want to make sure that they can see what they're looking at. But you can use something like anything from Zoom to Skype to anything to show it to them. What you're looking for is latency and then their audio quality. And then you're going to want to have that return back so that you can reinsert it to wherever you have the cleanest feed or wherever you're sending out the stream. So I would worry most about latency and, reasonably good quality, but latency is really the important thing that you want to look at for your contributors. Any other comments about that? All right, let's move on. Next question.
Wilson Martinez asks a setup to a joke, I think. Where is the best place to clip a lavalier?
Well, no, I think that's actually pretty serious. I mean, I don't know. We have a pretty serious set of conversations about that. I think that, labs can be very, there's a lot of, we have a lot of pretty, there's a lot. So like, for instance, with men, if they're wearing a shirt that has a button up, you oftentimes want to try to get that center. If they're sitting on the outside, you're going to want to look at, are they going to be turned in more often than turned out? So you're looking at what direction are they going to look most likely and lean that way. And a lot of times if they're wearing a dress jacket, you're going to make that decision as to where they're going to go. Also think about how they breathe. So right down the middle, one of the challenges you have is you'll get breath, hitting it. One of the things the BBC does, I don't think anybody else does it, but the BBC turns all their mics upside down. So if you watch the BBC, all their mics are upside down, and that's so that they don't get as many plosives going onto those mics. And so, but putting it onto the side sometimes is also a way to keep from getting those. And you can roll off, some of that in the mixer. But those are some of the things you start to think about. Generally, crew necks are much more challenging, and one of the things that we do is we tend to come up crew necks, and a lot of blouses and stuff like that become a real challenge because there's not any good place to grab on. And so with crew necks, a lot of times we want to come up over the back, so that we don't see anything in the front. And then you're trying to usually clip it to one side or the other, not right underneath. At least that's my overall real quick version of that. Bill, then Jeff, then Jason, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, rigging lavaliers is kind of its own art form, and people who have done it a long time, there's all sorts of techniques. The Broadway people use hair mics, and there's just 1,000 ways to do it. So you're trying to match this person and the circumstances you're following with the right gear and technique to get it done well.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Add to the fact that depending on what type of microphone that you have and what type of mic system you have, if that's going to help or bringing it up, bringing it down, if you're getting something off of Amazon, it's not going to be as great. You might have to bring it closer to the mouth, whereas something from DPA or something like that, you'll have better results with.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Brad.
Oh wait, Jason. Jason, I left Jason out. Sorry about that.
I was
Jason,
about to say, hey, wait a minute. So I would look first at placement, but more importantly, I'd say it's a matter of how you mount it. I would look at vampire clips if you're in a pinch, or even a Band-Aid or medical tape works really well. If you can get off to the side, but in a place with a dead cat that's big enough that, moving the neck won't give you that nasty scratch sound.
Yeah, and I'm still a big fan. I mean, I think sometimes when you're on stage, you need to have something that's highly directional, like there's a Shure 185 that a lot of people use for this type of thing. The real challenge with directional mics, so cardioids or hypercardioid mics, is that someone tugs their shirt a little bit and that mic turns like this, and then you're in never land as an audio engineer. So because now you have to turn it up so much that you'll pick up everything in the room. And so I find that, most of us kind of lean, if you're not on stage, and that's why a lot of us like to use headset mics. But if you're not on stage, a lot of us like to use omnis instead of cardioid or hypercardioid, because it keeps us from, having that directional problem. All right, next question.
Brad Ray asks, says, I'm a teacher and we show videos in our auditorium with a projector. What is the best way to have a video queued up so that the audience doesn't see me clicking play and the play status bar? We're using either a Chromebook or an iPad.
Go ahead, Jason.
In VLC, you can highly customize it such that the playback controls won't even show up. That's the easiest free way to do it.
Go ahead, Andrew.
A book over the projector lens.
I mean, this is also a good, and I'll warn you, if you're new here, we'll spend your money really fast. So I'm just going to warn you that this is an expensive group to hang out with. But this is a really good argument oftentimes for something like a Blackmagic Mini. The ATEM Mini is a great way as a small switching system that you can, throw down. You have your, whatever, a couple different sources. You could have a still up that you're going to put up there, and now you're able to fire it up. There are other software solutions as well. So something like a Pro Presenter, which is mostly used in the church environment, but also has tons of display tools, can kind of give you a bunch of tools that you can get out there, and it's not super expensive, but it's another piece of software that can help, make that work as well. Go ahead, Phil.
You could also just have it in Keynote or PowerPoint and just have it on a black slide. And then when you hit the next or swipe, it just plays. So you're not seeing any of that.
Yeah. And one of the big challenges with all of those is that you, with all of those, that the issue with playing out of a presentation deck is that a lot of times you'll get some frame loss. So you just have to know that frame loss comes with playing out of presentation decks. It's just the way that they manage those graphics. It tends not to be as clean. And that's why a lot of us use things like QLab, which is a dedicated playout system. A lot of us have started to play with MIDI, MITTI, which is another playout system. And so these are designed specifically to play these out. But oftentimes, if you're using those as part of a presentation, you are going to need some version of a router or switcher to kind of make that adjustment as you go. All right, next question.
Charles Klein, starting some work with a Fortune 500 company, and they use Bluejeans for their video conferencing. Any pros or cons I should be aware of?
Can you say that again? Can you read that again?
He's asking about Bluejeans, and do you have any experience or any pros and cons with Bluejeans?
I mean, I think the Bluejeans is fine. I'm in it a lot. So, I think that the fundamental thing you'll get if you're in Zoom and you go to Bluejeans is you're going to notice that you're not, the experience isn't as good as far as the grid. The grid turns out to be pretty powerful, and Bluejeans has kind of a very complicated way. You've got a bunch of different ways that you can change your view, and it's none of them seem to quite solve the problem that a lot of us have, with it. But I think it's a reasonably good, system as far as that goes. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
One thing to note, and that is check for the company's policy on videos and wearing clothing, because I've worked with some Fortune 100 companies that they disallowed things like Bluejeans in videos.
Well, are we talking about Bluejeans? Wait, I think we want to make sure we're talking about Bluejeans. I think we're talking about Bluejeans, the video conferencing
service.
Yeah. So,
well, okay.
So,
never mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Different, but it can be confusing. Go ahead, Phil. Next question.
David Moyers wants to know the easiest way to keep people from talking over each other when you have a big crowd like this.
Discipline.
Yeah.
And make people raise their hand before
Colin.
they start talking.
Yeah. See that? There we go. See that? There we have it. So anyway, so there's your example there for you. One of the things that works about this is that we're doing it all the time. And so there is an enormous amount of what makes this system work is the fact that there is a pattern that we've gotten into. We've decided, of how we're going to produce this, and everyone kind of learns it over time. It's not something was this way when we started 85 episodes ago? No. It was chaos. And so what we did is we all learned over time that we're all muting ourselves. We're all, we know that when we have to answer something, we have to answer it relatively quickly, or Alex will cut us off and move on. And that will, there's a pattern to that process. And so I think that we've learned as panelists to be a certain way. And we've also learned as the attendees to be a certain way. And that process, that culture, that community is what makes this work. I can't, generally, some of it is setting rules at the beginning of just, hey, we generally have people, you'll notice that a lot of our panelists are raising their hand. That is a learned skill that we've had, that we just needed to do that when we got to a certain size. We couldn't just have it be open, free and opened, and we had to have people kind of be able to work through that. So a lot of it's learned, but definitely at the beginning of a lot of shows when I'm not dealing with some folks that have been here before, a lot of times you want to explain what you're expecting. So raise your, we used to have it be raise your Zoom hand if you want to ask a question in the panel, or raise this hand if you want to continue the conversation. But now we have so many questions in the Q&A, we don't really get to the panel anymore. Anyway, so that's kind of the process, though. It's really setting the ground rules at the beginning, and really creating some kind of structure, because of course structure allows us to scale. All right, next question.
John Gerard is having trouble with his mic getting it connected through Filmic on a Google Pixel 4 XL. He's using a Rode video mic. Does anyone know of a battery-powered preamp if that's the problem?
Battery-powered preamp go ahead, Jan.
The Shure MVI it uses the battery from the phone itself.
And is that the MV51?
No, it's the MVI. It's the small one. It's a little tiny one. I've got one in the back.
Okay.
The thing I want to say is there's a new thing out by Rhodes where we're talking about the labs. It's called the Mag Clip, and it is pretty damn cool. It hides.
Hey, clean show. So anyways, but yeah, the clips are okay. I mean, I'm not a big fan of a lot of the clip mics. That's the only thing that I'd say is that I haven't, but we can listen to it. But that's the the MVI there. Okay, perfect. For some reason, I thought that was an MV51. All right, next question.
Charles Klein is asking, starting some work with a Fortune 500 company, and they use Bluejeans for their video conferencing. We answered that.
We got
Sorry,
that one.
that looks like a duplicate. Okay. Richard Armstrong. Hi, when using Cisco Webex with multiple viewers, what is the best way to present video from a local MP4 file and present a video played from YouTube?
So the best way to present the files is generally to use some kind of playback system and some way to switch it into the feed. You know, that's going to be the easiest way for you to kind of work through that. The best way to display a YouTube file is to download it. So if you have the YouTube Red or whatever they call it now, and a lot of times you can download those videos. Even if you can't, there's tons of tools on the web that you can find that will actually pull the bit for bit, pull the YouTube out of YouTube, the YouTube file. I'm sure that breaks some kind of rules, but all of us that do presentations with YouTube files, no one goes to the web and plays it into a meeting. You pull those down. If you're doing it in a closed meeting, you'll be fine. If you play those back into YouTube, you'll probably get flagged. So because you just took down a video and played it out. Generally, the way we use these is we have contributors who put up a YouTube video and they say, okay, just use my YouTube video. They don't want to find it again. And so we have to go get it. So that's usually that's the most common use. Michael Watkins and then Victor, and then we'll move on.
Yeah,
and
there's
we'll go to Joseph as well.
One really important thing is when you go to share that content, much like Zoom, there is a setting that is easily overlooked that you have to tell it to optimize for video and sound. The default is for text and graphics. And if you don't do that, you only get about 1 frame per second on playback. And if you do that, you actually do get really good sharing through WebEx of the content.
And a lot of times what we try to do is have some kind of a switcher, whether it's an ATEM Mini or something else that's going actually into your video pipeline. And then it's just the same video, pipeline that you have rather than screen share. So oftentimes screen share, of course, you're getting the same amount of bits out of any of these video conferencing tools. So you just have to decide whether you want to apply them to video frame rate or to resolution, but that's all you're doing. And so when you switch to optimize for video, it just says, well, lower the resolution so that it can play out. Victor, next question. Or I'm sorry, no, Victor, keep on going. And then Joseph, and then we'll move on.
No worries. One recommendation on a Mac is a program called Downy. If you need to download something from YouTube, very easy to use. Downy, I'll post. Perfect.
Joseph?
Yeah, I know they mentioned WebEx specifically, but if they would consider using something else, Jitsi has a cool feature that allows you, they call it share YouTube video right within the meeting, and you enter the URL and it actually adds that YouTube video as an attendee. And it's, I know it's not as nice as necessarily downloading the video, but it's nice because it doesn't show you the player controls, and it's a much cleaner way of doing it without having to share your screen and dealing with dropped frames. So that's something to consider.
Absolutely. Next question.
Michael Jones asks, when your only option is to stream as Wi-Fi, your recommendations, and as a hotspot, a good plan C, which one?
Hotspots for me are usually plan D. So I try to stay away from hotspots as that. I mean, one of the things you want to look at is if you're going to stream with Wi-Fi, if you're able to increase the buffer, then, on your contribution, how you're getting to the CDN, you want to try to increase that. That's going to allow that to be a little bit better. Then you have a series of other things you want to look for if you have it. I mean, if all you have is RTMP, that's all you have. But things the acronyms or the things that you're looking for are forward error correction, FEC. Another is a step up from what you'll have with RTMP. SRT, not the captioning, but SRT, it is secure, reliable transport, and that's going to improve the ability to get those bits out without losing them. And then finally, Zixi. So those are the kind of things that if you're streaming from those to your ingest, those are things you want to look for if you have a little bit of warning and you have some flexibility on what you're building. Joseph? And then Jason, and we'll move on.
Yeah, most decent routers have something called QoS, where you can essentially say this device, the device that I'm using to stream, should get priority over every other device on the network. So that should help if you're having latency issues streaming over Wi-Fi, to at least give it a fighting chance if you're using Wi-Fi to stream instead of Ethernet.
Yep, Jason?
Just a second to policing your router, and also, if possible, set to something that is not your ISP's DNS. Use Quad 9, use OpenDNS, but something that will route a little bit more deliberately.
Yep, absolutely. And then Leland? And then we'll move on.
I would just recommend, if you're not able to get Ethernet, the other option would be bonded cellular. LiveView has solutions, and several other vendors I'm sure out there have several other options as well.
Absolutely. Next question.
Troy Warrior wants to know, have online audiences changed over time as devices have changed?
Oh, absolutely. They've gotten a lot bigger. So when we started streaming, it was like, is anyone actually watching this? And so we were streaming to 60 people or 50 people, and so the availability has changed. I think that you're also competing a lot of times when you're streaming. It used to be a big event that you'd go at and you'd be looking at it and you'd be really focused on it, whether it was an Apple event or something else that was streaming when we started. Now it is, you're competing with everything else that someone's doing on their phone. You're competing with everything else that people could be doing on their computer. And so I think that the audiences have gotten bigger, but the need to be more engaging has also become more challenging. That we really have to keep people tied in. The way I do it, because is to have interactivity, to keep on having this conversation, as opposed to just having you listen to me drone on. And so I think that the easiest way to handle that, in my opinion, is to have a great conversation and have something people want to listen to over a long period of time. And so incorporating the audience has become more and more important, and the tools are still very crude for audience interaction. We're doing the best we can with the one we have here. But I think that as that gets better, we'll see an entirely different kind of broadcast, in my opinion. Any other comments there? Okay, next question.
Brian Mansour wants to know if you can share, what are you shooting or rehearsing for today, Alex?
We're rehearsing for, we do a Friday show that got slowed down a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but we do something for Patreon. So they have a thing called the Show Up, which will be tomorrow morning. And today we've been working all week with the artists and making sure that they're ready to go. And then today we'll rehearse to make sure that they understand how the system works and make sure that I'm ready for them. And then we'll do the show tomorrow at 10. Next question.
Mitch Jacobson asks, networking question. How can I set my Windows 10 computers to discover all the devices on my network via the Explorer Network tab? He has 24 computers, but only 11 show up on his Explorer page. All devices are visible on NDI Studio Monitor, and some of the computers show all devices.
Any tricks there? Go ahead, Jason.
Port 135, I believe, is RPC, and that should pretty much get you for device discovery. Also, check your work groups. A lot of the time, earlier versions of Windows have work group in caps, and newer versions have work group in lower.
Jeffrey?
It sounds like he wants to do NDI or discover NDI devices. The better thing is to download the NDI tool that actually can identify NDI devices there. That might help you better.
Great. Next question.
Prima Kadir asks a recommendation for portable audio mixers for live streaming.
So you'll have to decide what price you want to spend, like how much you want to. Like there's a wide range of opportunity there, So does anyone want? So what I would say is that you have to decide whether you want to go down the kind of the sound recordist view. So in the kind of the lower hundreds of dollars, you have Zoom. As you go from the $500 to $10,000 range, you have sound devices. I'm using right now a sound device is Scorpio, which is kind of way heavy-handed for what we're doing here. But you have but those are, these are very compact, very powerful mixers that can be done. But Zoom has a lot of stuff in the kind of the lower cost areas. As far as more of a production side of things, you also want to look at things like the Behringer XR12 and XR18 are really good solutions. Jan, George, and anyone else there? Okay, Jan, George, and Yashai, and then we'll move on. Go ahead. Keep it quick.
Between 700 and down, you got the Rhodes Podcaster, and you also, if you're going to do music, I recommend the Zoom L8. It's a great mixer. Check it out. I'm using it right now.
Great, George. Oh, you're muted, George. And we're going to skip you, George, and come back to Shy.
If you want the flexibility in the future to actually record into a DAW, the MixPre allow you through the USB mapping channel to bring ISO into, let's say, Pro Tools. So you can record each channel on different ISO. So that's an extra flexibility. So if you're investing already $500-600, that's give you extra options.
Absolutely. George, do you want to try it again? Still not hearing you. All right, we're going to keep moving. Next question.
Patrick Igo asks for tips for avoiding QuickTime recording freezes and recording stopped errors when recording ATEM Mini at maximum quality. He's closed all his other apps, rebooted, plenty of space, using a MacBook Pro internal SSD.
I would say that QuickTime is probably not the best way to record that. I think that you can probably see the Mini on the Blackmagic. I believe you can see it through the Blackmagic software, their desktop recorder. If you can see it there, you're going to find that that's probably a better utilization of resources than QuickTime. Does anyone else have any other suggestions there? Go ahead, Chris.
Well, can't you do it through NDI tools? Capture either your screen on your Mac or your phone and record that? It's pretty high quality last time, I think.
Yeah, I think that at 1080p at full frame rate, I'm not sure if 1080p at 60, you are going to push the computer pretty hard, and any kind of overhead, and NDI is going to add some of that overhead. I'm not sure if you're going to get the full frame rate. Jason?
I would say start unplugging stuff because your USB bus is most likely saturated.
There you go. All right, next question.
A. Mitchells, for those who have been attending InfoComm 2020 Connect, Cisco 2020 Framework, or any of the larger industry conference style events that are happening this week, what do you think of the hosting platform and the experience, quality, interaction, ease of use, access to resources, etc.?
Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, I've been on a number of those, and A. Mitchells and I had a little back and forth. I thought, they really break all of those rules that Alex have been kind of preaching here in terms of being interesting. And they could
interesting. It turns out it's important to be interesting.
It turns out
crazy. It's crazy that being interesting would be important for a show.
It's a sad state, and it's opportunity for all of us to try to help them. But my biggest point was you could have taken most of every single conference that I saw, every seminar, and you could have edited it down to about 2 minutes of important information. And that would have been a good exercise as a postmortem for the folks who are doing the content of those shows to really try to see how much of it was really useful time spent.
Yeah, I think that worthwhile audience interaction that justified it being live versus recorded.
They asked questions. You couldn't see the questions or vote on the questions, and we don't really know if they answered them or not.
Right. Yeah. And that's so the thing is that I think what we're realizing a lot of times when we look at conferences is they were always really bad. It's just that we were all, we sat through a handful of them and they were boring, but they had us because we had bought a hotel. We had, we flew there. We'd sit through it. A lot of us would sit back there and work on our computer and listen to it with one ear because it wasn't very good. And that was that's been the way we've lived in it. But now when we're sitting at home, I think it's become much clearer that it's really boring. And I think we accepted it when we were there because we were seeing lots of other people and I don't know, it was the culture. But now we're starting to realize, I think that it's not very good in the first place. And the problem is that once you aren't stuck on stage, you don't have to move at human pace. You can move a lot faster. You can start using this thing called editing to cut things down and make them tighter together. And it doesn't have to be, I think that doing it at human speed, what we're doing here, is great when we're having a conversation. Doing it when we're giving you information, it would be better to speed it up a little bit. Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to support that 100%. I think that internet broadcasting now is pretty much where broadcast TV was in about 1958. It's just come on the air. Everybody's trying to figure it out. There are not a lot of rules. And thank goodness there are people like Alex out here who is trying to have this discussion about what can it be as
Well, all of
opposed
us.
to
You know, I
just
think that
reflecting what it used to be.
I mean, I think that it's this group, you know, everyone in the attendees and that we're all having this conversation. We're here because we're all thinking about it. You know, we know that what was there before. You know, I think that I've been fortunate enough to, you know, stir up the pot a little bit, but it's really all of us thinking about it and working on it in our own little pieces that are we're all learning a lot faster because of it. Go ahead, Elaine.
It's amazing when talking with people like you guys, how much I've learned. I was in a session yesterday that felt like I was in a grade 5 classroom, totally disorganized. And then one of the panel or co-hosts asked me to take over the sessions because they thought I could fix it but you know, it's amazing. When we chatted after, he says, well, you know, you kind of keep it going, and it's all skills that I've learned from. So I think people need to understand that the people coming to your meeting, like you said, Alex, they don't have to pay for hotel rooms, so they can click off really fast. And also, if you bore them, that's insulting. It's wasting their time. So I think people need to sit into sessions that are well managed for a while, and then go manage a session.
Yeah, and I think that it's going to be a whole different kind of language that I think we're going to move to. And again, my whole thing with conferences is I don't think that we need them anymore. I think that the conferences are something that should be happening every week. You know, if we're going to engage with our users, if we're going to engage with folks, why are we doing it in 3 days and forcing everybody to stop what they were doing when we could do it 2 hours a day or 2 hours a week or whatever, and constantly have that conversation so that we all together learn how to have a conversation like we're having here. Stephen, 15 seconds, and then we're going to move on.
It's realizing these people pay for those slots and they want to take their 40 minutes and
Right.
they only have 3 minutes of content. It's sad.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, Phil, next question.
Kenny Hampton, from the lens discussion yesterday, when shooting on film, which requires developing, how do directors and camera ops get a good on-site representation immediately of the shots and the quality they're looking for?
I don't know who we should ask. If only we had someone that knew what that would be like. Oh, wait, Chris, what? How do they do that?
Yeah, experience and skill. You know, modern film cameras, we get HD video taps, which are quite nice, but you can't rely on those. The image is still grainy.
How does the video tap work, Chris?
So what happens is you have the image coming in via the lens and it goes into a prism, and the prism does a split of either 60-40 or 70-30 between the viewfinder and the video tap. So every time the shutter rotates, when it's not exposing the film, you have a 70-30 or 60-40 split between the eyepiece and the video tap. But really experience, same for focus, same for operating. The guy looking through the eyepiece, the camera operator, we rely on those people a lot to say, was it in focus? Did they clip the headroom, etc. And then you have to wait a day and not sleep all night till you get the report the next morning, and hopefully everything's okay on the QC.
It's great.
What's the acronym for the eyepiece? That's also called a.
Oh, there's a few, but this is a clean show.
Mickey, go ahead.
Yeah, do you know that the video tap isn't always an accurate representation of the actual exposure, because you're controlling a sensor that has a different sensitivity than the actual negative that's running through the gate.
Yep,
correct.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next question.
So Peter Moore asks a follow-up on a discussion I think we had yesterday about ATEM Minis and dimming the actual physical buttons on the panel. Peter Moore says, I've done a cursory review of the SDK for Blackmagic. I did a scan, found a forum thread there. The question is, anyone found anything about dimming the ATEM Mini further than the discussion yesterday?
Jason.
The short answer is no. They keep being asked, and I actually asked last year at NAB. There's no way they're going to do that.
Sunglasses. I'm recommending sunglasses.
Yeah,
just
Sharpie
make it
on
local.
them.
Yeah. Anyway, Victor.
Just that you can dim them, but we'd have to get ATEM to do it, Blackmagic to do it. No one else is going to be able to go in there and do that hard work.
Next question.
A bit of a follow-up to an earlier question. A. Mitchells asks, Alex, for a home studio setup where it's impractical to have wired Ethernet, are you a fan of any particular Wi-Fi routers? The answer is?
The two that, I mean, on the expensive side, Meraki; on the less expensive side, Ubiquiti. I mean, those are I think Ubiquiti and Meraki. Ubiquiti is going to give you a better value as far as better value as far as priced performance. The Meraki is really better if you're going to be building it into a larger system. And I have a little bit of both at my house. My work system is on Meraki, and my home system is on Ubiquiti. Any other comments there? Okay, let's keep moving.
How about
Ethernet
over AC?
Jason.
Oh, I'm
sorry.
Sorry. How about Ethernet over AC? I mean, that's an easy way to get Ethernet if it's not practical,
Yeah, we've had a couple people talk about that, and it sounds like it's a very doable thing to a certain point, and evidently Mike Andrews has a ton of transmitters and receivers. All right, next question.
I'm going to shorten this. Robert Keys asks, how do you mic a classroom of 20 to 50 students where you need to set up or tear down before and after 5 or 10 minutes of setup time?
Handheld mic, SM58 with a wireless transmitter, pass it around. I mean, this idea of, now here, the only issue we're getting into with that is that you have people inside of COVID-19 not wanting to handle the mics, not wanting to move those mics around. So that's the one, the one challenge that we have with that is there. I think that you can, other people can kind of jump in. I mean, there's a lot of expensive solutions that make this work. Another way to think about it is an operator with a shotgun mic that is kind of pointing it at people, just a little pistol grip, and they just kind of point it at people to gather some of that. If you're not in an amplified location where you have speakers, that might actually work. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
They could do like the conference style where they have two mics in positions in the room. People will have to stand up and go to them, and to avoid on the COVID, possibly a wind filter to help with that.
Yeah, it's just a matter, and some of that's like kind of explaining to people how it works. Now, I think that we want to be sensitive to the whole process. With kids, I don't know how much they're not touching everything that they're sharing everything anyway in a classroom, but we can do the best we can to feel better about it. Jan, John, and then Michael, but keep them 15 seconds each, real quick.
Okay, many people are now getting involved with UV hand sanitizers like this.
But the problem we really have is during the show of them touching it. It's not between is the problem. It's the during the show. Okay, John, go ahead.
There's a device called a Sound Shark. It's a parabolic like they use at footballs, but it's in games. It's a 9-inch parabolic microphone. Works nice.
That'd be fun.
It works very well.
And the kids would love
parks. Yeah. Oh yeah.
I know if I was a kid and they gave me a parabolic mic, I would have so much fun. Anyway, I used to actually have one. Anyway, they're a lot of fun. You shouldn't give them to kids. Michael Rogers, and then Victor, and we'll move on. But do it very quickly.
Yeah, I have 32 channels of Chinese versions of conference microphone goosenecks that are wireless. I can just walk around, drop them on the tables, and they work real well in a small environment.
It can be challenging in 10 minutes, though. All right, here, Victor, we're going to keep moving.
There's the thing called a catch box. It's a square sponge that you can throw around literally in the conference with a mic.
I think that the catch box is cool. I think that the challenge we have is the and there's a couple of different ones where there's some kind of ball or something, but then of course we're passing COVID-19. We're just passing it from one child to the next. So that would be the only sensitivity probably to that process. Okay, next question.
Brima Kadir asks, please recommend portable Wi-Fi routers for live streaming.
For some reason, my PepWave. PepWave is one that is going to be, going to be your industrial version of it. So PepWave is going to let you have you can have Wi-Fi, you can plug it into Ethernet. It's a very complex router that you can kind of do a lot with. Is probably one of the more powerful ones. And I think some other people have some suggestions of things that are a little bit more straightforward. Grant, and then Jeffrey, and then we'll move on.
I've said it before, but there's a service that I use called Speedify. Speedify.com, and they just added a new feature. It's actually just a VPN. You connect as many connections that you have on your computer, Mac or PC, and it makes it into one connection. So it works great for doing 4G. But they've just added a new feature that detects streaming. It detects Zoom and all of that, and you can actually see it, and it kind of prioritizes. It does its own prioritizing. It's very cool.
That's great, Jeffrey.
What I use, it actually came out for CES last year. It's called the GLiNet Slate. It's a really small and compact. It plugs in USB. It's not for high-end stuff, but you end up putting this into a really nice switch, and all it's doing is giving you IP addresses in that case. So I use this a lot. It's a great thing. But I also do the YouTube type streaming. So if you're doing something higher end, I don't know if this will work.
Next question.
Has anyone embedded a live Zoominar in their website? Pros, cons, or tips?
I don't think anyone's embedded it. I think generally when people are using Zoom, they're using the whole interface. So I think that if you're going to, oh, go ahead, Jason.
2 weeks ago, I did a board of trustees meeting and embedded it into a website, and it was absolutely just fine. I was going through Restream, but yeah.
So you're doing
fine.
RTMP to Restream, and then from Restream to what was the player?
Well, it was just one way. It was just playing out. I didn't do it two ways. So the staff were basically watching the meeting.
I understand, but Restream, what platform were you using as the player for that you're embedding from Restream? Where did Restream go to?
An ATEM Mini Pro.
But how did they watch it on the website? What was the player?
The front end.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Just the embed code from YouTube.
Okay. So, and you could also just go straight from Zoom to YouTube and embed that as well. So you could, either one. Yep. Grant, go ahead.
I don't know if they're actually talking about embedding Zoom itself instead of using the app and embedding Zoom inside a web page, which I've done a little bit of. We use a platform called Events Air, and they have a new thing called On Air, which is their whole thing for doing virtual conferences. It works fine, but of course it's all the same stuff that we wrestle with doing something in the browser. I still prefer just to push them out into the native app onto the machine.
Right. So. Absolutely. All right, next question.
Peter Moore wants to know if you know anything about an immersive game tech glasses called Archies using a game Trio Tech, and do you know anything about it, and why did he feel like he was on a roller coaster after he used it?
So I most likely, if you feel like if you're not doing anything aggressive and you feel like you're on a roller coaster afterwards, it has to do with the frame rate. So one of the things about our brain is that when our eyes don't match up with our inner ear, our brain thinks that it's been poisoned. So there's a lower brain issue of and Disney in the 90s did a test where they brought poor college students into Disney World, and they had a room, like a slightly larger conference room, that was all covered in plastic. I don't think that the students knew what was going to happen when they did that. And what they did is they had a scaler that basically changed, or a frame rate scale, where they could slowly turn the frame rate down. And they literally had, this is the early VR. They had VR goggles, and they would just ask them to look around. They had a little scene. Hey, just look around. Tell us what you see. And the kids would look around, and they'd look like this, and they're turning the frame rate down. And what they found is that people start throwing up at about 16 frames a second. And everyone, including pilots, will throw up at about 11. So, so there's a certain frame rate that your brain is just naturally going to respond to, and that's to keep you safe. It means that you should get everything out of your stomach because something's not agreeing with you. So, so that's why for millions of years it was useful, and now it's really more difficult with VR. Some people are definitely more sensitive to it. Even at full frame rate, they can have problems. So you have to look at whether you're having an issue with other more high performance ones like an Oculus or an HTC. If you're not having trouble with that and you are having trouble with the Archie, then it's probably the frame rate. And it's just the processor's getting nailed, and it's giving you a lower frame rate, and it's hurting you. But you also may have, some people have very, very sensitive inner ears. That's why they also get sick on a boat. It's because they have a twitchy inner ear that is paying attention. And when you take drugs, it just mostly just numbs your inner ear so that you don't feel it anymore, which, is kind of crazy. Anyway, so Phil, next question.
Nick Mitras asks, any thoughts on low latency mode in mixer streams? I don't see any other similar options on other platforms. Low latency seems to increase viewer interaction.
So there's low latency modes in a lot of different things now. So we've definitely seen that increase. Twitch works at a pretty low latency as it is. YouTube has normal, which is about 22 seconds of latency, 22 to 29 seconds of latency, depending on the day. Then it has low latency, which is 10 seconds, and ultra low latency, which is 5 seconds. What that latency, the lack of latency, or as we reduce this, what it's doing is taking away the buffer. So there's a buffer that is there to make sure that the user doesn't see any drop frames. So we're gonna give you 20 seconds worth of content, and if your Wi-Fi isn't very good, or if someone's stepping on something, you still have all that data, and you can just kind of go back and forth. Whereas as we start to reduce that buffer, then if you have any issues, it's gonna fall apart. So that's why you go towards low latency. Also, super low latency, of course, is something that is like WebRTC. Those types of things can get down to what we're looking at here in Zoom is about 75 milliseconds. So about 2 or 3 frames of delay. But we break up. We have to be lower quality. All those things are there because we're trying to maintain this tight connection at a very low latency. You definitely are going to get more interaction. It really depends on the size of your audience, because once you start getting questions, and if you look at this, we're answering questions that were asked 20 minutes ago. So the thing is once your audience when your audience is 50 people or 100 people, it's really great to be able to react to them. Once you get an active audience that's over 100 people, the human latency is higher than the technical latency, and I don't think it really matters that much. And so there are places where it does. If you're going to do audience interaction, we've done things where the audience can actually type on things. We had, for instance, a show where, I think I've talked about it before, where you could turn on a flamethrower if enough people voted on it. And we got a lot of audience interaction, and that needed lower latency, or it didn't need it, but it was more fun with lower latency. So you can, there are things, if you're having audience truly interact with the event, voting or moving things around in the event, where that low latency makes a difference. But once you start getting an audience to scale, I don't think it's as important. Somebody hey, go ahead, Leland, 15 seconds.
Just one thing to keep in mind if you're going to attempt to use low latency mode is you will need the hardware to accommodate. So you're going to want a graphics card with at least 4 gig of memory or higher to accommodate for that type of stream in the first place. It's not going to work.
And we're moving into speed round. So next question, we're going to go quick.
Troy Warrior's trying to clarify a question he asked earlier. I was thinking, how is audience behavior changing over time? How have people's behavior online changed with the tech?
I think people are just they're much more demanding, over what they want to see. They want to be part of the conversation. They want it to move quickly. They want it to be interesting. I think that people were just happy they were seeing some video, and I think that now people really want to. I think they've gotten a lot touchier in that sense. Next question.
Christy Lech is asking a question regarding streaming Zoom to Facebook. Anyone have any experience getting video stats after the fact, or after the average time of user engagement?
It should be like any other event with Facebook. I mean, once you finish it, you should be able to look at average view time. The big thing is that, when you're, just as an aside, when you're looking at Facebook stats, your reach is worthless. Like, who cares? Like, the reach doesn't mean anything. Your views under 10 seconds, not really important. So really what you want to look at is average, the number of views that you have over 10 seconds is more important. And then of course your average view time. If you can get on Facebook to over 2 minutes, you're doing pretty good. On YouTube, you want to be looking at over 10 minutes is about 5 times more is what you would expect as a good stream. Because Facebook, you're really fighting the problem with Facebook is that you're really fighting the whole stream that you're looking at. All the new items that people can go look at is the thing that is going to challenge you and keep you from keeping people for very long. Any other comments there? Yeah, go ahead, Elaine, quickly.
Mine is more of a question. So if you were to want to stream to the public like that, would you prefer YouTube or Facebook?
If you want to actually interact with the audience, I think Facebook's probably a little bit better. The commenting in Facebook is a little bit better because people are using real names. YouTube and Twitch are basically hobbled by the fact that they're not using real names, and without real names, they just get garbage. in the comments. I mean, an enormous amount of garbage. And so, so I think that it's usually YouTube is a better one for average view time. If I'm not going to interact with folks, then YouTube's fine, but if I actually want to have comments going in, if you're doing Zoom, that's why we stream to YouTube, is because we're not interacting with people on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, I'm sorry, you have to come in here to interact with us. So I'm not worried about the comments on that side. Whereas if I was, if I thought that I was going to include the Facebook folks, I would do that. All right, next question.
Jamali Jack wants to know, not sure if this is the right forum to ask, but when can we expect new episodes of the Teardown? It was great.
I am so close. I'm so close. I have the system all set up to do it. I got my telestrator up and everything else. And I have been so busy with all these decks that I've been producing that I all the way through the weekends and everything else. But what I'm planning to do is break the teardowns into shorter pieces. So my goal is to start putting them out July 1, and they're going to be like a minute each day, not 20 minutes every 6 months. So my goal is to do shorter ideas and thought processes around those teardowns. And so I've been putting it together, and I have all the videos collected, and I have all the thoughts, collected, and I have the system set up. And now, of course, I'm going to try to get a bunch of them out, because I'm about to move my studio from where I am right now to 3210, which is the old ILM stage. And so I'm moving into an office there. And so there'll be some point in the next couple of weeks that I have to tear everything down and put it back up again. So I'm going to try to get some out before that happens. All right, next question.
Charles Klein wants to know if you're wearing your COVID turtleneck, and what brand is it?
I don't know what brand it is. It is my COVID turtleneck. This is like a wrap. It's not a turtleneck. I really think someone should do a turtleneck, but I keep this on when I'm out because I just don't forget it, And so I have a better mask that I actually have in the car, but this just means that if I forgot and I walked out of the car, I can quickly pull it up, and it's good for haircuts too. So anyway, so it doesn't have something going over. And robbing banks, I feel like I have these I have a big Cambodian scarf that I wear a lot for when I walk in, and every time I wrap it and put it on and I walk into like a liquor store to get some gin or whatever, I feel like I'm knocking over the liquor store. So and I anyway, so and I asked the guy at the liquor store, I go, is it weird that everyone comes in here with a mask on? And he's like, very weird. It is very weird. so anyway, Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, you can find a lot of those on Amazon under the word Gators. The snowboarders wear them.
Yeah, it was like $15. It was not a particularly expensive thing. And I do have, we were talking about a Mac break. I definitely have some ideas on building cooler ones, and ones with little mics in them and everything else. So, but this is my just in case I need to use it really quickly. I keep it on. Anyway, next question.
Stan Chan, Wirecast versus vMix. If you had to choose one, and why?
Well, if I was on a PC and I had to choose, then I'd pick vMix. I think vMix is probably a more robust solution. I'm using vMix right now for some of the call stuff, or I'm starting to work on it. I'm actually going to drag Leland into hanging out with me for a little bit, because there's some stuff I'm like, oh, I need Leland. I can't figure this out. And so, but vMix is a pretty slick application. If I was going to pick it on the PC, on a Mac, I'd pick Wirecast, because vMix isn't on the Mac. Now, Jeffrey may not agree with me here, and so we're going to give him a moment to. We give you the floor for 15 seconds, Jeffrey.
15 seconds. Okay. The really quick thing is, if you want to do something really cool, like maybe a TikTok or an Instagram TV, then Wirecast will work on both. Newer version is coming out, and it's got some great improvements, including with the chroma key.
Awesome. All right, next question. We're going to move really fast here. We've only got a couple minutes.
This is the last question. A. Mitchell just really wants to clarify the earlier question about the big conferences, Infocom, Connect, and so forth, and specifically about the platform experience and how was the interaction and the quality and the ease of use. So I think rather than the content.
But the content is everything. I'm sorry. I'm like, look.
I think he must have produced this or something.
Go ahead, Phil. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, and that's my point. No one ever sits there and says this is the most boring thing. But gosh, I can sure chat and tweet really well. But I'm going to sit here and watch boring speakers. So you might have a great platform, but unfortunately, you're just hampered by whatever's on the screen.
And again, I think that when we talk about the platform, it is a mixture of the content and the platform, which is that the content has to be audience responsive, and the platform has to allow it to be on audience responsive. And it's going to be very, very hard for these companies to figure this out, because they are so into having someone practically read off a teleprompter and practice everything and only have questions for a small window. It terrifies people to actually have a conversation with their audience. And so it's going to be a huge challenge for them. And because they want to have, especially on a keynote, and that may be an exception, they want to shape the way that the press looks at it. They want to shape the way that opinions are created. But I can say that as someone who's used the style that we're using here for the last 20 years, I find it to be much more fun for everyone. Michael, you've got about 15 seconds.
Full disclosure, I work for Cisco. I watched Cisco Live this week, and they could have learned a lot from this group. The production value really took away from some of the good content, because the audio and video was just literally all over the place, not consistent at all.
We spend an enormous amount of time working with people on we spend hours. We're working on an event for 2 weeks from now, and we're spending an hour and a half with every participant because of that. So, like to try to get it all working, and, we're moving them from room to room and doing all these things because audio and video, audio especially, but audio and video really matter. All right. We are shifting gears. It is now 8 o'clock. We are moving into the second hour, and we have Leo Laporte here. I see Leo. Leo has made it to the group. I was so excited with the idea that Leo was actually willing to get into Zoom, and so we're excited to have him here. Hey, Leo.
It's so awful.